Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 421.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you're here today because what it comes down to is you're out there, you're looking to build your cash flow, right? And you're on this journey. You have a plan, in fact, of where you believe this journey is going to go. In fact, you've got a vision, you've laid it out, and nothing can stop you from achieving it. Unless we start talking about the things that happen to us in life. It becomes a journey. And along that journey, we can be confronted with all kinds of different things. What's really interesting is you may not have realized this, but one of the core skills you must learn to develop is to roll with the punches, learn to pivot, and become and transform into the thing that the market decides you should actually do. I have with me today someone that you actually may already know for many different reasons, but most importantly, what I want you to know is that he's got a new book. He definitely has an interesting perspective, and I think that we're going to learn a significant amount of information from him. So I have with me today none other than Isaac Lidsky. Now, some of you may remember him as the character Weasel in NBC's Saved by the Bell, The New Class. What's interesting is that you may not know, or maybe you do, that he has a rare and blinding disease called retinitis pigmentosa. What does that mean? That means you can't really see, but that doesn't stop Isaac. What I like about that is that he's been able to take what has been the hand he's been dealt, and more importantly, you turn that into an asset in many different ways, not only selling companies, but being a CEO. He's got the book, as I mentioned, TED Talks, and all kinds of things that you and I will be able to learn from today to help us become bigger, better, and badder. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you take out that notepad, the iPad, or whatever it is that you feel like capturing this information on, because I have a feeling you're going to put this one on repeat. Help me welcome none other than Isaac Lidsky. Isaac, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you so much.
You are quite welcome, sir, and I am glad that you are here. Now, with this being your first time here, I tend to ask everybody the same question the first time that they're here. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes. So, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. And I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. Chief among them is that occasionally as an entrepreneur, we can envision ourselves as, flying around, maybe with a cape or tights and all these things, but we're saving our customers with our products and services. But also, like a superhero, an entrepreneur has a beginning. So, if you think about, Peter Parker and Spider-Man, there was a time before Spider-Man was the Spider-Man that we all know and love today, to where he was just a college student going to school, trying to get some, photos so that he could make sure that the ends of months met together. So my question to you is as follows. What we want to know is, before the Saved by the Bell, before the TED Talks, before your new book, Eyes Wide Open, before everything that people know you for today, who is Isaac Lidsky?
So, I grew up, lived a very sort of a Hollywood fairy tale life.
Okay.
I was born to a middle class family, parents who loved me and nurtured me, great intellect. School was easier for me and I loved it. And, I grew up thinking that it was a pretty, standard American sort of fairy tale story. Like I said, now I did have this childhood acting career. I did a diaper commercial when I was 6 months old.
Wow.
And it was sort of all downhill from there. So it's hard to figure out who Isaac Lidsky was before acting.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. It's been a part of your DNA from the beginning.
Yes.
Got it. So, but take us on this journey, because I know for a lot of people, especially as entrepreneurs, most of us don't wake up one day and just go, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to have a business and do TED Talks and write books and do these things. There's usually a process of becoming something. So what was that like for you?
When I was 13, right around the time I moved out to Los Angeles to do Saved by the Bell, is when I was diagnosed with my blinding disease, retinitis pigmentosa. So, that was a pretty big kind of pivot point in my life. And at first, I was terrified, and I knew that blindness was just going to ruin my life. I thought that as I sort of progressively lost my sight, I would also lose my independence and my ability to achieve. And I just thought I was destined for this sort of unremarkable life, small and sad, and probably pretty lonely.
Yeah.
And that was that was a fiction. One of my fears. It was lies. But in the early years, I believed it.
Yeah. I think there's a number of entrepreneurs who are feeling or have felt those types of things. Maybe they're in business and they have something happen to them. So where does the courage, so to speak, come from? Because clearly that's not how the story ends, but it's definitely a reality of what can happen. Maybe, someone experienced the idea of a whole stream of revenue disappearing. Not to say that losing revenue is anywhere near the same as losing eyesight, but it can feel very similar to some people because it was their whole world, in some way, shape, or form. So I guess my question to you is, through that process, going from, terrified and knowing that this is something that is coming for you, because my experience with RP is simply that it happens progressively over time. It is not instantaneous in a lot of cases. And you knew this is coming, and yet at 13, you're dealing with all of these things on top of it. Where does the courage to continue even come from?
All of us, you're right. All of us confront, our challenges, right? Loss of a job, loss of a customer, end of a relationship and all that. And I don't think we can, compare or evaluate which ones are worse or better or kind of how bad they are. It's true that, particularly in the face of the unknown in sort of times of crisis or challenge, that's where our fears kind of step in, and it can be really pernicious because, in the face of the unknown, fear shows up with all these sort of awful ideas. Psychologists call it awfulizing, right? But we visualize, we imagine the worst case scenario, and we spend a lot of time with dark imaginings and doom and gloom. And it feels so real that if we're not careful, if we're not aware, it becomes real. But in the way in which I lost my sight, you're exactly right, was sort of progressive over time. It took about a dozen years. And over those dozen years, I sort of literally saw the illusion of sight kind of breaking apart, in my mind. I mean, so you think about what it feels like to see, right? It's immediate, it's passive, like you open your eyes, there's the world. Like we even say seeing is believing. Right. I saw that that's not true at all. Sight is this masterful, complex sort of virtual reality that your brain creates for you. And it's unique, it's personal, it involves far more than just information from your eyes. And yet we think it's real. So we literally create our own realities and we believe it. And that was the profound insight that blindness gave me that really made blindness ultimately one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. Because, we shape our own realities in so many other ways without even knowing it. Fear, for example, we can experience fears, machinations of our own mind. We can experience them as truth. Right. And they become true when we do. Our self-limiting assumptions, our misconceptions about strength or acceptance or weakness or, surrender and, all these things, the bottom line, I guess, is that, I literally saw firsthand as I went blind that in every moment we get to choose who we want to be and how we want to live our lives. And that's our ultimate power and our inescapable responsibility. And it was liberating for me. It was really empowering for me to realize that.
Yes, and I love how you say it's the ultimate power, an inescapable responsibility, because I definitely feel that. Now, tell us about the journey, because obviously you've got the book Eyes Wide Open, and that's great, New York Times bestseller, all those things, but that's not where the story starts. I mean, the genesis of that has to be somewhere before then. I don't know if it's, during the time with the Harvard Law School. I don't know if it's at the first company. I just want to know, how do we end up there?
Sure. So yeah, in the early years, as I said, I believed the lies of my fears, right? And I knew that all these awful things were going to happen, and blindness was the worst. And I lived this sort of race against time, this feeling that it was this amorphous boogeyman blindness that was going to try to hunt me down and destroy my life. And meanwhile, I prayed that the scientists would cure my disease in time. I was hoping for a Hollywood ending, and that was just an awful reality to be living in. It changed for me. The transformation, so to speak, began when I went to go meet with a low vision rehabilitation specialist, an occupational therapist named Chris. And, I showed up there expecting to talk about, like I said, blindness, capital B, and tomorrow and the future, and this sort of awful, misery that was, around the corner. And she wanted to talk about, very specific, concrete, practical solutions. She wanted to talk about whether I should start learning how to use a cane for the blind, whether I should start learning how to use screen reading software for the blind. And I was excited about all those things, but I was also kind of frustrated with her because, my thinking was, now is not my problem, right? Today is not my problem. I have that sorted out. My problem is tomorrow and the future and blindness. And I had an epiphany right there in her office. It literally hit me like, there only is right now. Well, that's all there ever is this moment. And in that moment, I realized that everything I thought I knew about going blind or being blind was fantasy.
Wow. And
more importantly, I hadn't done anything to learn about going blind or being blind. So, in a sense, I realized that I had to hold myself accountable. I was choosing to live in that awful world. And that realization dawned heavy, or bright, I should say, and the burden felt heavy. And so I decided to make some other choices in my life, and that's really where it began.
Indeed, and that's what I like about a lot of the stories for many of the entrepreneurs that have been here, is that there's always that point of, it's kind of up to me. Maybe there's some responsibility I can take. I can own this. This is not the end of my story, and we go through this transformation to figure out, how do we want to show up to the world now that these things have occurred, now that I have realized, these things. And it's something similar to what I call that superhero moment. It's that moment where the character realizes that, man, I've got something special here that I could use, and I can use it to not only my benefit, but also to the benefit of others. So how do we go from, where you are there to in terms of, at the doctor's office, etc., to even having the courage to get the first company done?
Once you have that realization, once you recognize, your role in creating the life you want for yourself, and really literally shaping your reality, then the rest is pretty straightforward. Now, it's difficult. It takes effort and discipline, but it's pretty straightforward. So, for me, I have been pretty committed to focusing on some pretty, big questions. What is it? What is it that you want to do with your life? How do you want to be spending your time at work, and at home? What kind of a business person do you want to be? What kind of relationship do you want to have with customers, with employees, with bosses, with investors? And what does success look like to you? What's important to you? What do you value? And they're big questions. It's easy to kind of roll your eyes and say, yeah, whatever. But the truth of the matter is, whether we realize it or not, whether we like it or not, whether we want it to be so or not, we are answering those questions every moment we're here, with every thought, with every action, with every emotion. So, for me, it makes a heck of a lot more sense to answer those questions with awareness and intention and purpose than to kind of persist as reaction or happenstance in life. So, I guess that's a long-winded way of saying that throughout my life, at different chapters, different periods along the way, I've made changes and entered sort of new chapters or new challenges really on the basis of what was important to me and where I was, in terms of my family life and all that kind of in those moments. And it's been a heck of a ride. Like you said, I've had a legal career, an acting career, an internet startup career, run a construction services company these days. And, along the way, wrote this book and do a lot of corporate speaking. So it's been great. I love it.
Well, okay, hold on. You said that really quickly, and there's some people who are like, hold on, did he just say all of those things? And I'm like, yes, he said all of those things, which actually leads me to something that I think is true, and I'm curious to hear your perspective in the sense that would you, if you could, say, imagine a situation or a world or a version of yourself where RP did not enter into your life. Do you think some of the things that you have just said, from the legal career to the construction companies, the startups, etc., are those even would you have dared? Would it have been as important? Would you have had what it takes to make those things happen?
So, I argue in one of the chapters of my book that question is impossible to answer, and that even posing the question is not necessarily terribly useful. That said, I'll put it this way. I wouldn't change a thing about my life.
Right.
Not a thing. Going blind, like I said, was one of the greatest blessings. It was a unexpected blessing. But it was one of the greatest blessings there is. And I live a life filled with joy and fulfillment and success. And it's largely because of the lessons I learned, the insights that I gained as I lost my sight. And I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Well, what I find interesting is that I first of all, I like the title, but I really like the subtitle: Overcoming Obstacles and Recognizing Opportunities in the World That Can't See Clearly. Oftentimes in my own, work with entrepreneurs, it's just literally looking at things differently, the same situation that they're already facing, that then reveals the solution that was actually already there and dare I say, before their eyes. I guess my question becomes, what are some of those things or situations that you've encountered, or either as a business owner in your legal career, etc., that might be able to help an entrepreneur who's thinking like, I can't see a way around this, that you are like, oh, these are very common. This is a very unfortunate way of thinking, and you're thinking this way simply because you can see, and you're not thinking of how to look in a completely different fashion. Hello there, entrepreneur. This is Jay Massey, and what I want to say to you is that the number one mistake that I have ever made in business, number one, has been waiting too long to do the books, waiting too long to get the bookkeepers, the accountants, the CPAs, the CFOs involved, and I don't want you to make that same mistake. That mistake cost me over 6 figures, and now for a significant discount, you have the ability to get your books together using FreshBooks. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over to gofreshbooks.com/CashFlowDiary. Again, that's gofreshbooks.com/CashFlowDiary. FreshBooks is the easy to use software designed to help you, the small business owner, the freelancer, get organized and save time on invoicing, getting paid faster, keeping those books in order so that it becomes a bonus for you to do your taxes as opposed to a burden. Go over to gofreshbooks.com/CashFlowDiary and get started today. And now let's get back to the rest of the story.
Yeah, too often, it's a real shame. Too often we can be our own worst enemies, right? So, we tell ourselves these stories, we have these narratives, we make sort of self-limiting assumptions about ourselves. We tell ourselves things about what we can and cannot do, about our, quote unquote weaknesses. And, we believe our fears and we frankly oftentimes have a hard time listening to, one another, let alone our own sort of hearts and souls. So, for me, living eyes wide open is really about kind of taking a step back and recognizing, our role in all those things, and recognizing that ultimately it's our choice to develop the narrative we want for ourselves. In the business world, I think, where that often can, one area in which I found that can get us into trouble is I think a lot of times entrepreneurs will set out to build or develop to market the product or service that they're really excited about, that they want to sell. And those can be interesting, but I can tell you, it's often a heck of a lot more lucrative and rewarding to figure out the products or services that your customer wants to buy.
Right.
So, that in that sense, I think, really just asking a lot of questions, keeping an open mind, always taking in information, and not necessarily letting your own voice or voices in your head kind of drown out what the world's trying to tell you.
Right. And I can imagine that oftentimes we're faced with so many different choices of what the world is trying to tell us, shape us, and you've been in a unique position where you were forced to come up with that vision extraneous to that. There was no way you could rely upon what the world was going to say, because the world doesn't exactly say that, hey, you can still go do all of these great things even though this is your situation. But my question becomes, why did you feel the need to write this book, but not just write it, but specifically address the audience you're addressing?
Yeah, so this book is not about blindness.
Right.
It's not about disability. It's not even just about challenges, as you said. Why did I write the book? I wrote the book because I am convinced that the kind of the peek behind the curtain, so to speak, into the sort of see the wizardry of the mind, the awesome power of the human mind. What I glimpsed and what I was, able to learn from that view has been such a phenomenally powerful and positive force in my life, and I am convinced that anyone can see what I see if they want to, if they choose to. This is a vision; it's a philosophy that's for everyone. So I've long wanted to write the book, and I'll tell you, my wife and I had triplets in September of 2010. And between the sort of triage of infant and newborn triplets and some new business ventures and stuff, I had my hands full, literally and figuratively. And but 3-4 years in, with my business, my current business succeeding beyond my wildest imagination, and the kids kind of getting to a point where I can imagine them someday reading a book. I wrote the book, I think, first and foremost for them.
I see.
With them in mind.
Got it. That makes sense.
And I hope they will read it. I hope they will read it someday, and I hope that they will see life the way I see it.
Okay. So, because you said this earlier, and I thought it was interesting, and I don't know if anyone else was listening that picked up on it, because you said anyone can see the way that you see.
Yes.
What I would like to hear in your words is, what do you see? How do you see? What is it that you are referring to when you say that? Take us into that, because I want to see. Because trust me, I know you've got a great perspective. I just want to see it, because all of the and one of the a lot of people don't know, I've been around a number of individuals with vision challenges, and I always find it awesome to listen to what you guys have to say.
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to stop you, because
there's a
semantic difference, but it's a difference that I'm pretty passionate about.
No problem.
I have no vision problems. I
Good
have
point.
A great clarity of vision.
That is
something
correct.
that I'm blessed with.
Yes.
I got sight problems.
Yeah.
And I know at some point and I've got about the worst kind of sight problems, right? But I know it in some respects it's a word game or whatever. But in my life, that distinction is an important one.
Totally understood. Got it.
So I don't mean to
it's great.
Upset with you or anything, but so what's my vision? Here's what I see. Always in life, no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, always we can look to people who have done far more with far less, and by the way, been far happier doing it. Right. So think about prisoners of war who transcend in the face of just unspeakable atrocities and torture. And Viktor Frankl is a pioneer in the field of psychology. He wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. This is a man who, as a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp, decided that he was going to find purpose in life and even joy in life, because the one thing his captors could not control was his mind. And so you look at these people, you look at these examples, and to me, the inescapable conclusion is that it's not our circumstances that govern the life we experience, the life that we live. It's how those circumstances manifest themselves in our daily experience is entirely within our control, and it's our choice. And again, it's not easy. It's not simple. There's not like some aha moment where now it's meditating on a mountaintop or whatever. I struggle every day, and some days I'm better at it, some days I'm not. But it's certainly worth the effort because time's going to go by whether we like it or not. And a lot of the things that we take for granted in life, frankly, a lot of our biggest obstacles and challenges are self-imposed, are self-created. And once you see that, like I said, it's empowering and it's liberating.
So what would you say then, in your time in business specifically, have been some of the challenges that you've seen entrepreneurs create for themselves?
Well, it's one of the words in the title of your podcast is cash flow, and it's cash flow is an amazing thing. It can be your greatest ally or your most vicious foe, right? And that's something that you can read about in textbooks and study, and I did, but until you're living it and until you're in there, it's really hard to understand and then hard to manage. But I think there are strong parallels, between sort of the concepts of cash flow in business, by the way, and sort of cash flow in our personal lives as well. That's but I'll leave that for another day. But so cash flow management is huge. Too often an unprofitable business or unprofitable ventures, fundamental problems in your business can be obscured by positive cash flow dynamics that you don't understand. And then, of course, despite the most profitable and best of intentions, the greatest ideas in business, if the cash flow dynamics are working against you, it's not going to last very long. So to me, there's a lot of kind of the whole yin and yang and this whole sort of metaphysical aspect of life in the world really kind of manifests itself in business in this sort of force that is cash flow. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I get it 100%. And I guess it makes me wonder or ask the question to you, would business be more of an art or more of a science? And it sounds like a mixture of both based upon what you're saying.
No, there's no question it's both. There's no question it's both, I would say. So here I was, a pretty elite, fancy lawyer in New York, and somehow that seemed problematic at the time. My wife and I had our kids, and I didn't want to practice law anymore. I had enjoyed being a lawyer in the public sector, but big law firm life wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. So my college roommate and I bought this struggling residential construction company in Orlando, Florida, and my wife agreed to move our family with me from Manhattan to Orlando, where I was going to go from being a lawyer to being a construction guy.
Okay, and that was supposed to be easier?
What could possibly go wrong, right? I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
Okay.
No, I mean, not easier, but it was supposed to be a better quality of life. Above all else, I wanted to spend time with my kids. I wanted a yard behind the house.
Got it.
And all those things. Well, lo and behold, these two Harvard guys who decide to buy a construction company in Orlando. One of them, my roommate, he kept his fancy day job in the world of finance. I quit mine and, took the helm as the first chief executive officer or whatever. Well, about 3 months in, we realized that all the financial data we had meticulously analyzed was nonsense, garbage in, garbage out. Mm-hmm. Kind of far from treading water, our business was sinking like a stone. And desperate times call for desperate measures. So that was my sort of baptism by fire in the world of cash flow.
Awesome.
And I can tell you that it was understanding and leveraging cash flow dynamics that saved our business.
Got it. Totally understood. Now, for those that might not have an understanding, because maybe they're at the beginning of that,
sure.
How do they get insight into what you mean when you say the cash flow dynamics? Because right now, here's what I know. Someone's listening going, I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that what I'm looking at is actually a good thing, and they want to learn from your experience.
Well, so, we roll up our sleeves. We do basically, like forensic accounting, and we try to figure out at the, job by job, house by house, project by project, how are we doing? Which customers are profitable or not, or how bad are they? And, step one, the cash flow, law number one is doing work that's not profitable.
right.
Where you're not covering your direct costs. You never want to do that, right? So we walked away from a ton of business. We sort of shut down about a third of our revenue 3-4 months in, which was painful, no doubt, but the alternative was worse. So then you say, I'm going to work, those customers who are going to stick by me, who are going to be my partners, who are going to work with me, give me better pricing or whatever. That's fine and all, but I still have these bills to pay. And if I'm not collecting money before I'm paying money, it's only a matter of time before I'm underwater. So the next step was to work with our vendors, our suppliers, and our bank, our creditors, and principally our suppliers of materials and whatnot, and work with them. Hey, can we push out our terms? Can we pay you net 45 days instead of 30 or 60 days? And go circle back with the customers. Any chance you could pay us sooner? Mm-hmm. And it's not rocket science, but you do the deeds that need to be done, and you try to bring enough money in before so much money goes out so that you can live to fight another day. By the way, one way to lower your outgoing cash is to stop paying yourself, which I did. So right. For about a year I didn't draw salary, and it was hard times or whatever. But bit by bit, working with our partners, we managed to kind of to turn it around. The sort of metaphor I like to use is that sort of standard scene in any kind of race car driving kind of movie where the guy's like, get me out before the pace car or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what you're trying to do. You're trying to make sure that pace car doesn't get by before you get back out on the track.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, though, I'm assuming not only this experience, but in the fact that just the sheer fact that you're in the real estate world of some kind. And I know that you often have to see opportunities that others don't see because they're usually presented as an obstacle at the beginning. What are some of those times where either in business or et cetera that others saw obstacles but you saw opportunities?
Well, that's the fundamental story of my current business, ODC Construction. I mean, my college roommate Zach and I, and end of 2010, beginning of 2011. When the economy was in a state of misery, globally, and when industries like residential construction were at like literally once in a lifetime lows, and it was just, misery and pain. Mm-hmm. And we showed up and said, hey, this is a great time to kind of take a look at the market and say, if and when it does recover, what opportunities is that going to present for various providers in the field? Can we envision a new model, a better business model, a greater value proposition for these builders when the market turns around? And that's what we got really excited about. That's ultimately why we bought the company.
But now, hold on 1 second though. There's someone listening who wants me to argue with you and say, but how did you know, Isaac? How did you know? Because all of the signs did not point to, yes, this is a great time to buy.
It was possible that we were going to be a year or 2 or 3 years too early. And it was even possible that if we were that early in the sort of recovery, we would fail because of it. But we figured, given our best guess, our best shot at kind of the housing market and where things were going, we figured now's got to be a pretty good time. It's going to come back eventually. Markets are cyclical in general. The housing market certainly is cyclical. Meanwhile, the subcontractor base was decimated, right? There weren't a lot of subcontractors still around. Those who were didn't have access to capital and yada, yada, yada. So we figured, look, someday in the not too distant future, we think these home builders are going to show up and have a real urgent need to start building houses at a pretty high volume. And we'd like to build a company that can help them do it. And that was our vision. Is it possible? Was it possible that we were going to fail? Absolutely.
Awesome. Nothing
ventured, nothing gained. But, we gave it a shot.
Clearly. Now, with that being said, though, what would you say to the person who can't seem to get themselves? They feel like they want to be there, but the fact is that they can't find that guarantee to move forward. How did you guys develop the courage to deal with that?
Well, if you're looking for a guarantee, you're lost. And that's true of anything in life. We are never in control in this life. And again, part of the way that we can experience our reality, much like sight, we have this illusion that we're in control and that there's certainty, and there just never is. So you got to let that go, right away. And then at the end of the day, it's got to make sense to you. Have you done all the research you need to do? Have you talked to all the people you need to talk to? Have you gotten the support, from friends and family, from, those close? And if it makes sense to you and it's something you're passionate about and it's a vision you can get excited about, then go for it. Do it. And by the way, even if you fail as a business proposition, I think true success is in the actual striving, right? It's in the worthy pursuit. So, I think too often we like to we think we can wait until later to see how it all turns out to decide whether we made the right decision or not. But that's just not the way the universe works. I mean, you make the right decision or the wrong decision now, and then either it works out or it doesn't.
Well, what I like about what you just said specifically is like if success is in the striving, then the actual arrival at some destination is not necessarily the measuring stick.
No, not. I would argue that it really shouldn't be. It can't be. If you are seeing yourself in your life clearly, it is not about achieving some result, some data points, some objective external measure.
You do know it's actually a little strange sometimes when you say when you say the words if we're seeing ourselves clearly, right? You're not.
See, you cited people are convinced that seeing is fundamentally intertwined with eyes, and it is just not. It is not. I am a very visual person. I visualize things all the time. Incidentally, I'll tell you, when once your visual cortex has matured and you've developed and your brain has sort of figured out how to cook up this illusion of sight for you, only about 10% of what's going on in your brain in this sort of process of sight is information from your eyes. The other 90% is your memories, your opinions, your emotions, your conceptual understanding of the world, your mental attention. All of these things are going on. And by the way, even when your eyes are out of the mix, even when you're asleep and you're dreaming, your visual cortex is firing away, right? When you think about an elephant. Well, the same parts of your brain that respond when you actually see an elephant respond when you think about an elephant. So I'm going to talk with you about what I see and what I don't see and my vision and all that. And it has nothing to do with eyeballs.
Yeah, and that's what I find so interesting is just to some degree, I feel like I'm the one. I'm at a handicap and I want to get, I'm like, how do I get to where he is? Because then I'll be able to see more clearly. And and I think you have a unique advantage that honestly, to some degree, it is something to strive for because you will likely perceive things completely differently than someone who can see you.
So, I've had it both ways. I grew up with sight and then, lost my sight and slowly over time. And obviously now I'm blind. So, all kidding aside though, when I say things like, anyone can see what I see, I mean it to my core. And, if I didn't mean it, if I wasn't 1,000% convinced of it, I wouldn't have bothered to write the book. And frankly, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. What I'm passionate about in life, my number one, sort of calling these days really is trying to show people what I was blessed to see in terms of our potential to really live the lives we want for ourselves.
Indeed. Now here's what I know that there's a number of people who have listened this far. They've enjoyed everything that you've had to share. But they want more. They want to find out more about what you're up to. They maybe even want to pick up a copy of the book. They just want to know more and begin to see how you see. What's going to be the best way for them to catch up with you?
Sure. So I'll make any such person. I'll make you a deal. So the best place to go is my website, which is just my last name, Lidsky.com. So it's L as in Larry, I, D as in David, S as in Sam, KY.com. There's information about the book. I have a blog. There's a link to my TED Talk there. It's all there. Now, here's where the deal comes in. I genuinely want to know what you think. Questions, comments, concerns. Do you think I'm full of baloney? Whatever you think, I want to know. I'm curious. I read every submission of forms to my website, every email, and I intend to keep doing so as long as it's practicable. And I genuinely do want to know. So please check it out, but please let me know what you think.
Indeed, I think they will do exactly that. Now, before we jet, I've got one final question that I'm really eager to hear your answer, actually. So let's pretend for a moment that there's a person who is, standing on the precipice. They think, I'm going to become that entrepreneur. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. I'm going to deal with obstacles and I'm going to make this thing happen. They're going to actually put on that superhero outfit. They're standing in front of the store, picking out their cape and tights and going, I'm going to do this thing. Now, like I know, that oftentimes when we make those types of decisions to go up, be more, and etc., we're often, have a companion. And that voice in the back of our head is that companion that can say things that usually are not necessarily supportive. It reminds us of, what we're not, what we can't do, why it won't work. And for some people, they're even related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that the person listening is actually going to follow through. They're actually going to do what you suggest. And they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
So you've gotten to the heart of the matter, my friend. So I call that voice the critic, and we all confront real critics, but more profoundly, we all have that critic in our minds, that internal voice, that nasty voice that you mentioned. But we also all have a lot of strength within. We're born that way. That's how we're wired. It's in our DNA. And for me, ultimately the art of the entrepreneur is to silence that critic, to ignore that critic, and to harness the strength within, to listen to your inner strong man or woman, and to believe them. And the critic, all that's the sort of circus of disruptive thoughts and emotions. That's not reality. It is just noise, unless you choose to make it your reality. And that choice is yours. So again, not necessarily saying it's easy, but it's definitely worth doing.
Nice. Well said. I know I definitely appreciate your perspective, your vision, and the wisdom that you have shared with us today at the Cashflow Diary, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? That means get over to Lidsky.com, Lidsky.com. Why? Because you want to see like he sees. Because I just think it's absolutely amazing how much we can learn from each other and different perspectives. If you want to develop true vision, it sounds like we've just spoken to someone who has it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.